We try to talk to as many people as possible. We try to identify as many patterns as we can. We check with official data and visual data and satellite data. The more you can confirm something with something else, confirm someone with someone else, the more reliable their information is going to be. Hi, welcome back to Tay of the Peopleist, and welcome back to Hard Talks and Human Rights. I've talked a lot about North Korea on this channel by now, and I realize I haven't confronted this big problem. The same question or challenge comes up every time people start talking about North Korea. How do we know what is real and what isn't? What is the actual truth about North Korea? How can we tell who's lying? It's not an easy question, but we do have answers. The first thing that comes to mind on the question is that someone is trying to manipulate the truth in one direction or another, and I'll help you figure out who might be lying and exactly why. For today, we'll kick it back with some Gulf again. I think there could be a few difficult things to talk about. I mean, how much details I need to give and what kind of arguments I have to make. So I thought it's a bad idea to pick a game that needs me to focus. So just sit back, watch me touch some virtual grass and enjoy the swings. There's a lot of dense content, so if I repeat myself or talk a lot about one thing, just try not to get too annoyed, right? Now, here's our big problem for North Korea, before everything else. It's a black box. I don't mean black box as in the airplane and car camera. This is a kind of philosophical and like theater direction idea. But to make it simple, a box can be clear or it can be dark. If it's black, you can't see inside, right? There can be a window or something, a door, a lid, but these don't let you see everything that's inside. They just let you see one part of it. And North Korea is a black box because sometimes you see some of it, but if you aren't North Korean, you don't get to see all of it. Now, hold on, let's try to be fair here. There are 200 or more countries in the world, and they all have different regions inside where life can be really different. You pick any country in the world, any region, any town, any neighborhood, any house, there's going to be something different going on there that you can't see. We can get pretty familiar with where we live or where we're from, but you're always going to have a sort of limited view of other places in the world. This is a big thing with social media, right? We keep seeing all these promotional videos of like Japan, South Korea, sometimes China, where they say, wow, you won't believe how cool it is, or Japan is living in 2050 or something like that. And they show us how you can touch a screen to get a little toy train to deliver you half-frozen sushi at some chain restaurant or whatever. I mean, never mind that Japan still keeps paper records and communicates by fax machines because their bureaucrats are 150 years old and don't like to learn new skills. That's just another conversation entirely. But the point is that people show you what they want you to see. And we get biased from this, right? It's, you know, we start to imagine places as people tell us. This is a basic thinking problem for the whole world, for all people. It's kind of frustrating for me to explain why I don't want to go back and live in the US again, because people have what's called an imaginary, an idea of what real America is, what it looks like, but it's just their idea. US to me is a lot of dusty highway roads with gas stations and occasionally a sandwich shop, you know, crime, a bad job market. It's hard to explain to people in Asia who watch a lot of glamorous travel videos on YouTube that show some of the most developed cities, like the trendiest neighborhoods in New York, you know, beautiful landscapes in Colorado or something like that. It's hard for them to really imagine why someone wouldn't want to have all that, right? And it's not that one is the real US and the other is the fake US. It's that the whole picture is hard to see whether or not you're from the US or have been there or if you just want to go there someday. And this is all really relevant because it's also about how we see North Korea. Just like with social media, the governments and organizations, they all have what they want to show us in different parts of the world. And that goes for North Korea as well. They absolutely have an agenda. And while none of these people are completely wrong, none of these parties are completely wrong, some of them have more of an agenda to hide things, and other parties, organizations, governments, and so on, their interest is to show more things. And we have this kind of problem with the viewer's eye too, right? Because the viewer, especially if we're talking about like YouTube or something, the viewer doesn't want to see a balanced view, right? I mean, most people are not excited to hear this, but also this, sometimes that, but not too much that, the moderate view is just not that sexy. It's not that attractive. It's much more exciting to imagine a place where everyone is rich and parties all the time, or to imagine a place where everything is hell and everyone spends every minute of their life cursing God and the supreme leader. So with that in mind, we need to know who has what agenda, what is it that they're trying to show, what are they trying to hide, and why they're going high throttle on something. So let's start at the top with the North Korean government. The North Korean government is a big liar. I'll just go say it. I mentioned this problem a bit before when I was talking about the UN at the Review for Rights of People with Disabilities specifically. So some representatives from different countries were asking, what can you tell us about violence against women or about violence against kids? And the reps from North Korea, they basically said, these problems don't exist. And this is a huge problem of extremes. They said, and I'll repeat what they said, that there is, the reps from other countries, they said there's nowhere on earth with perfect rights. There's nowhere where women have perfect rights. There's nowhere where children have perfect rights. Everyone likes to argue on the internet that this country is more progressive, or this country respects some traditions about the rights of women or minorities or whatever. And I mean, that's fine to degrees. Every country has some way of protecting women or children that maybe other countries don't have. And every country on this planet has a problem with women and with children and with every other group. There's just no such thing as a perfect country. So if North Korea says, if the North Korea representatives, if they say we're perfect, they must be lying. And this is not just because the black box is keeping us from seeing how life really is for women in North Korea, but because of a single, basic, simple fact that no country is perfect. If no country is perfect, how can North Korea be? They make a huge mistake, I think, by refusing to accept even this basic fact, especially at these UN reviews where they say that they want to improve on their human rights. How can you improve on anything if you don't want to admit that there's something you need to improve on? If you keep telling people you're perfect, it just doesn't work. You have to admit that you have some kind of problem if you want to improve that problem. And this is what the North Korean government does. They release news and pictures, videos and things, and all of it is just promotional. Big parades, successful agriculture and housing projects, just success after success. It's not every day you're going to hear a report that says we had a military test and it failed. Sometimes it happens, it just doesn't happen that much. Whenever it does happen, it gets followed up by, and the people, we had a military test, it failed, and the people responsible sincerely apologize and are taking punishment and personal steps for failing the people, and they're working on improving very hard right now. It's a very loose admission of fault. Does that sound familiar? Because we have a similar problem with businesses and with business people in the West. Do you know about that restaurant, Noma? It was called the best restaurant in the world. Just Michelin stars all over the place. They're just constantly talking about it. And then it came out, and it kept coming out. I swear it came out like 10 times or something, that the staff were being underpaid and abused, that it was just a terrible place to work at. So the owner comes out with this whole mistakes were made and I will personally atone for it thing, that kind of public apology where he just goes and takes a vacation or something and then opens a new restaurant. I think it's really good actually to identify and blame the mistakes of other people in other parts of the world while talking about the North Korean government. And no, I'm not being sarcastic here. This is not whataboutism. This is how we defeat whataboutism. We don't say that these problems don't exist in North Korea because the problems are worse in other countries. We shouldn't do that. We do the exact opposite. We talk about the universal. If these problems exist everywhere else, why wouldn't they exist in North Korea too? So this is what I'm trying to say, that you can see lying everywhere, right? You can see lying businesses and lying governments everywhere in the world. Pyongyang will tell you that. I mean, that's what they did at the review last year at the UPR with the Human Rights Council. They said, South Korea, Japan, US allies, don't you dare try to talk about our human rights problems when you guys have all these problems that you need to address in your own countries or in countries that you're invading or occupying. And they're right. These countries do need to address their problems. All four of them, US, Japan, South Korea, and North Korea. They all need to address their faults. Human rights is universal, and that means everyone needs to take responsibility. So yeah, if you've seen North Korean propaganda, you know what I mean. It's the image of a perfect country is just an image. And people go there, tourists, right? Or they used to go there. And there was a kind of mixed response. They would say things like, no, we didn't see anyone starving or wearing torn clothing or anything like that. But they'd also talk about how there were just not very many places that they could actually go. I mentioned a few books before about tourism and residents in North Korea, and they made it clear that they were being kind of ushered along on like a theme park ride. So, guardrails everywhere, right? So if the North Korean government doesn't let people see everywhere, then how can we say that this doesn't happen? I didn't see anyone in a political prison getting beaten, so I guess it doesn't happen. No, that doesn't make sense at all. A lot of things happen outside of your vision, and the North Korean government doesn't want you to see it all and report on it. Why not, right? Why does the North Korean government care? Why are they trying to hold back the reports? What does North Korea have to gain from hiding things? Well, there are a few goals here, and I probably can't name them all. I can give you a few. Limiting visibility limits reporting, and that makes it easier for them in international politics. Mr. DPRK, we at the UN Human Rights Council are very angry at your political prisons. So yeah, did you see those prisons? No? Then I guess you have nothing to complain about, huh? That's their defense. And it makes it easier for country-to-country relations too, or country-to-business relations. If you want tourists to show up, or if you want business investors to show up in your country. Business investments, you know about all that? Last month, British American Tobacco, they got hit by 2 lawsuits because they've been illegally selling cigarettes in North Korea, and they've been giving money to the North Korean government. That's a huge issue. But businesses are not going to do something like that, or at least they're less likely to do something like that if there's a risk, Obviously, it's not a zero chance because BAT did it, but a lot of companies would not risk doing that. How do you do your business when all the customers are complaining about human rights violations? It's really easy for Nestle and all, I guess. So that's why I was talking about Cocoa Life a few episodes ago. Do you remember that? Chocolate companies, they make up their own certifications, fake certifications, so that they can say their chocolate is ethical, even if they have no idea if their cocoa beans were made with slavery or not. That's just better for shareholders. When customers don't know if a company is profiting from human rights violations, then they'll just keep on buying. The average person is not going to ask questions. So North Korea is better off when they just sweep things under the carpet. It's good domestically too. A lot of North Koreans cannot tell you what's happening on the other side of the country. It's going to be a lot harder for the public to have faith in the Kims if they know what the most extreme human rights violations are, if they know what's going on in political prisons or something. But if they don't know that political prisons exist, or they think that these prisons only exist to hold the most evil, most traitorous traitors, that's really going to change how they see things. It's a lot easier to run a country when you have less reasons to make your citizens angry. So those are a few good reasons to sweep it all up. And okay, yeah. So there's a lot of things that North Korean government doesn't want you to see. And let's be clear, that doesn't mean that if we can't see it, it must be true. No, that's wrong. People can still lie about what's going on in North Korea. We still want to have evidence. We want things to be as iron tight as possible, although that's often much easier said than done. But I want you to know and understand this. We cannot have it perfect. If somebody gets murdered, you want a video of the murder. You want bloodstain forensics, camera data of the outside of where it happened with a timestamp on it. You want the face of the murderer and a report showing his driver's license was dropped outside of that place and he left some gum on the wall that he had been chewing. And the saliva on the gum shows it's his DNA, and also his hands were on the gun. And we have the gun, and the forensics on the bullet perfectly matches the shape of the exit wound on the victim's body. You know, that's perfect evidence, right? But guess what? Human rights violations in North Korea, they do not happen under a camera, and there's no UN police on the scene collecting everything. It's not possible to get perfect evidence. North Korea is a black box. So we have to be reasonable and meet somewhere in the middle. We want as much evidence as possible. We want to see some patterns. This is really important here, the patterns. This is what good evidence collecting looks like for human rights. The more you see the same kind of crimes pop up, the more it looks like there's some kind of pattern, that it's happening, you know, there's a pattern that makes it look like there's a good chance that it could be for real. Makes it look like it's happening, and makes it look like it's happening more than once, or maybe it's happening a lot. I think I mentioned the COI before, the big document that the UN published. 300 pages about a whole rainbow of human rights violations in North Korea. The point it made was not that violations happen. I mean, that's pretty much a foregone conclusion now. The point was that there seemed to be systems making the same terrible things happen over and over again. It's not just here and there, it's like a regular occurrence. And that was just everything in the report. Okay, so now let's move up to the UN, how they get their information. NGOs. The UN has offices to investigate human rights, but it's not like a police office. They're not putting detectives on the scene to collect evidence in most cases. In some cases, yeah. There's, not North Korea, but in some other cases, there's something called the special rapporteur, which I will call the special reporter, because I don't agree with the reason why they're not using the simple English word. For most countries, the special reporter does actually go on the scene, but not for the DPRK because they're usually not allowed in. The special reporter works from her office. She has several assistants. They do research the boring way. They Google a lot, and they make a lot of phone calls and emails to try to get info. It's important to know that the special reporter is supposed to be someone who does not have a strong bias. Basically, someone who does not really have a specific stake, like a national stake, that will make them for the North Korean government or against the North Korean government, you know, something that would interfere with the investigation. The current one is Elizabeth Salmon. She is from Peru. What does Peru have to do with North Korea? Not a lot. You're not going to see a reporter from South Korea or Japan or US or something like that for obvious reasons, because there's a conflict of national interests. This is a good thing for those of you out there who are concerned, because she is not supposed to lie about North Korea being good or lie about it being bad. And why would she? Because she doesn't work for Pyongyang. She doesn't work for the Chinese government or the Russian government. She doesn't work for the CIA or the US. She's Peruvian. You cannot get a perfect person for the job, but I think this is the best you're going to get. This is the best system that the UN can have to remove biases. Find me someone better if you can. So those phone calls and emails that the office makes, they're trying to figure out who knows something, what do they know, how did they get that information. They're calling a lot of organizations that I previously worked with in Seoul. These organizations are registered as consultants to the UN because they have some of the best access to information. There are no consultant organizations based in Pyongyang because they don't exist. North Korea has 0 organizations that investigate the government or police or any public entity. 100% of their community groups are under control of the central government. This is not normal. If you can speak English, you can probably name a civil group in your country. If you're American, imagine ACLU, NAACP, PETA. These are NGOs. Their job is to collect information and report on what people and what governments are doing wrong. North Korea doesn't have those. They have national security bureaus equal to the CIA and the FBI. Imagine if your country had no ACLU, but it did have a very big FBI located in every city. That's North Korea. So the next question here is if these NGOs in Seoul are actually reliable. And I'm going to say something that will make some people say no, and then I'm going to explain why those people are not 100% correct. So the problem with these organizations is that they have to have some kind of mission or process that a NATO government, like the US government or South Korean government, would agree with. They get funding from South Korea's Ministry of Unification and from the US through NED, DRL, USAID, and other departments that were almost shut down last year by the Doge department. So if you are a strong leftist, right now you are probably hearing alarm bells going off in your head. I'm not going to tell you that NED and DRL are good organizations that only exist for the betterment of mankind, because that is not what I believe. They are very political organizations and they do a lot of terrible things. What I will tell you, however, is that they are not 100% built around sabotage operations like you might imagine. They give money to organizations who align with their goals. That is their bottom line. So let me put it to you this way. If you are a pizza company, you will support businesses that make flour, cheese, and tomatoes. This does not make you a flour company or a cheese company, right? Doesn't make you a tomato company. If you are a cheese company, you're not a pizza company. You can say you have some interest in pizza, but you're not a pizza place. Let's go further than that. Let's say the wheat company in your town is owned by the mafia. You get paid by the pizza company, but you are a cheese company, you're not the mafia, right? So we can say there's some indirect links, but we're not categorically saying that they all have the exact same problem, the exact same interest. So what this means is that those government bureaus absolutely do give money to what I personally would call terrorist organizations. This does not mean that every USAID-funded organization is a terrorist organization. I cannot give you the numbers, but I will say probably most of them are not bad places or bad people. When USAID was shut down last year, a lot of people in developing countries died because they could not get medicine or emergency aid. A lot of what USAID does is humanitarian aid. A lot of what NED and DRL do is actually stuff that the American public in general agrees with. Supporting minority groups, protecting LGBT people, and mostly just doing and publishing research. They are not nearly as nefarious as the CIA operations that you can imagine if you're a leftist and you're very critical of these organizations. So if you are opposed to these organizations because they have a history of interventions, you are absolutely fair to criticize them. Yes, be critical, be open-minded, be cynical. But if you think that 100% of organizations with their support are terrorist groups, then I'm sorry to say you lack critical thinking skills. Right now, I am giving you the information you need to make an educated judgment. If you refuse that information, but you accept other information, that means you have a bias. That is your responsibility. That is not our responsibility as human rights advocates. We cannot fix your thinking. We can only give you information, and it is up to you what you do with it. I would also like to say, if you have a problem with these organizations being funded by USAID and by others, then fix it yourself. We are not excited to ask governments for aid. And also, you should know those governments do not set up our organizations. We start independently. We try to be independent. We try to get away from government funding, but we will apply for government funding when we have to. We need money to do what we do, and we need money to eat and pay rent. In case you didn't notice, we're still living under a capitalist order. So if you want us to be free from those governments and free from their influence, do us a favor and financially liberate us. We invite you. Sorry to be too critical. I just want to be kind of clear because I've gotten quite a bit of criticism from the other side who don't pay attention to what we do but still judge us for it. Now, with that being said, there is still a problem in that these organizations have to align interests with the groups that are funding them, right? We're limited in what funding we can get for what investigations. You're not going to see an NED-funded study on the impact of US and UN sanctions on the economy of North Korea and how it affects human rights. That is a shame, but it does not change the value of the other studies we do. We are not restricted from initiating other studies, but if we need funding for one specific topic of study, we have to sell it to somebody. UN organizations have helped us a lot. They've especially given us funding so that we can do things like supporting female victims of violence. That's been really huge for our operations. But also a lot of work funded by government bureaus has helped North Korean people directly. How so? Well, one, funds are used by these NGOs to directly support North Koreans. The NGOs give the North Koreans, we're talking about resettled North Koreans, right? Those who are living in South Korea. They have given them all kinds of support in the form of medical support, educational support, career counseling, social networking, tons of psychological therapy, things that they really need to stay alive and to recover after going through really traumatic experiences and generally tough times in 3 or more countries. So the other thing that these organizations give the North Koreans is closure. There are a bunch of different ways that NGOs collect data, and I'll get to that soon. But a big one is testimony. How can you know what North Koreans go through if you don't talk to them? Talk to the North Koreans, talk to them, get their stories, and find out. A lot of North Koreans don't want to talk, but a lot of them do want to talk. Why do they want to talk? Because they want to be heard, because it helps them feel like they're not crazy, that what they've been through actually happened, that it was real. They want to be validated because they know that many people have done many wrong things, abused and hurt other people. And they want to talk about these people, these perpetrators. They want to say the truth and they want the truth to be heard. Some people think that the witnesses are lying. That's probably going to be a talk for later. The fact is that some of these witnesses are lying, at least some of the time. Some of them are not. Have you ever been a victim of a violent crime? Have you? Because I have. And I want to tell people what happened to me, truthfully. If you've been through something pretty bad, you might feel the same. If you've had a traumatic experience, you might want to get the truth out there about someone who has caused you pain. So, all right, data collection, right? I brought you the first one. Number one is testimonies. We've established that. What else do we have? What other kinds of data do you have? What can you collect in an organization that's going to be reliable, that you could take to the UN or other governments? We have satellite mapping. This is real evidence, but how useful it is depends on some other things. Let's give you an example here. So let's say we get someone's story from a testimony, and they say, I was taken as a political prisoner to Camp 14. Then you ask Pyongyang. They say Camp 14 does not officially exist. So I go back to Mr. Jung. Hey, where is that Camp 14 that you mentioned? He says, start from Hwangdo town, go south for a bit, go 20 kilometers, turn left at the tree that looks like a man, and so on. Okay, so we get on Google Maps, or we get some ultra high resolution, expensive private satellite mapping data, something like that. Okay, and we follow his directions. We follow them to a T, and now we're in the middle of nowhere. Okay. There's a big steel facility in this picture. It has barbed wire around it. There's no sign indicating what this place is. There's no buildings anywhere near it. There is now a possibility, a non-zero possibility, that this is Camp 14, that it exists, that Mr. Jung may be telling the truth, and Pyongyang may be lying. We can't say anything 100%, but now we've made some things more clear than they were before. Having data that supports other data helps build a better chance at truth. This is corroboration, which I'll get to. We have official data also. We have reports from the government, from the North Korean government. And we have established, I have argued, that Pyongyang lies a lot, but it doesn't always lie, and it doesn't lie about everything. We established that Pyongyang and escaped North Koreans often say the opposite thing from one another. But there are times when the two say things that match up, and that builds some credibility. It's not like we only collect human rights info when we're investigating human rights. If, for example, we want to talk about education as a human right, then first we need to know about education. We can ask North Korean people, what was education like back in North Korea? And we can ask the North Korean government, what is education like? And then we check to see what are the common points between their two stories. It can be something as simple as a guy saying, I went to Haesan No. 3 elementary school. And we check something from the government of North Korea saying Haesan No. 3 elementary school is an excellent school in Ryanggang. Well, now we have two very different accounts that intersect and tell us that this school definitely exists, probably exists. So if someone says they were abused by their teacher at this school, at least we know that this school exists, which raises the chances that their story is real. The opposite logic would be if someone said this violation happened at this school and there's no evidence that this school has ever existed, then we have a problem. So that evidence raises the chance that their story is real. And it also leads to other investigations, like how many schools there are and where they are in North Korea. Are there enough schools in North Korea? And if the school is failing to build enough schools, that's going to be a violation of the right to education if the government is not trying hard enough, right? We get closer to the truth about other things as well. So next, we have statistic data reports. These organizations, these data collecting organizations, they don't necessarily criticize the government or care about human rights as a general field. I've worked with human rights organizations, but there are other organizations that have other goals that kind of coincide, but they're different kinds of goals, I'll just say that. So maybe they just care about one sort of thing. Like, for example, WHO, the health organization, World Health Organization. They collect data on health in North Korea. I can't say that they're free of biases, but I can say that their basic mission is basic data collection. The North Korean government doesn't necessarily want to fight with them, right? We can collect market and trade data from trade organizations and from market investigators. Exports, satellite maps of rice fields, potato fields, things like that. You can check Daily NK, I think they collect a lot of that. So we have organizations that are focused on North Korea but are not critical of them. We have organizations that focus on a bunch of different places, and North Korea is included. And these are kind of detached, disinterested groups that give us less biased data that we can cross-analyze to figure out the picture in North Korea. We can analyze non-human rights data from a human rights perspective. Now, next, we also have reports from friendly governments. China does not talk too much about North Korea, but it does publish some useful things that we can look into. Information on their government bureaus, laws and policing, reports filed by citizens, things like that. Some of them might be public. So we can look into that and see if there's any information about Chinese police or judges handling North Korean escapees. Sometimes there is. Sometimes we can get them to admit to cases where they violated or where a North Korean had their rights violated while on Chinese soil. We have spy information. I don't mean like weapon secrets or something Cold War-y like that. I mean like someone snuck USB drives or cameras or phones across the Chinese-North Korean border, got someone on the ground to collect information and then send it back out. If you go to Daily NK, you can actually see some very recent pictures of things like markets in North Korea. So there is that. This stuff is really hard to confirm. If we want to know exactly when and where and the context of the information, that's hard for us to check. But it's still photos. There are still things you can see and understand from real North Korea. Sometimes it shows that Pyongyang is lying, but otherwise it just lets us see how is North Korea, what does it look like right now, and it helps us build a context to figure out which kinds of human rights violations might be true, and also what could be getting better. If you look at the markets on the ground, can we see people getting more food than before? Can we see people using technology and things that they didn't used to be able to use? That's important information too. We're not just looking at how bad human rights is, we're also looking at how good it might be now. The key here is pattern building, right? Corroboration. If we interview a lot of people, then they say the same thing, well, that's corroboration right there. But okay, what if they're actually CIA agents or they're paid off by the Triple P? What if they're actors or they're not real North Koreans? This is all possible, but we try to prevent that through corroboration. We try to talk to as many people as possible. We try to identify as many patterns as we can. We check with official data and visual data and satellite data. The more you can confirm something with something else, confirm someone with someone else, the more reliable their information is going to be. So one time, all right, I'll give you a little story here. One time I was staffing a PR event with one organization, and this guy comes up to us. He's reading one of the charts that our organization put up in our booth. It said, people get killed for watching dramas? And he asks us, what is your source on that? Well, we do have sources. We have testimonies from people who escaped, and we can't parade those people out in public. It would put them in danger. For me personally, I attended a closed door lecture where a North Korean told us about a multi-tiered punishment system. If you watch 1 hour of foreign media, then you could get put in prison for like a year or 2 years. Don't quote these numbers, please. I'm just paraphrasing here. I don't remember the exact information he gave. If you watch a whole season, it accumulates. It can add up to a life sentence, or they'll just upgrade it to execution. That's how it works, he says. But how do I tell the public that? How do I tell the public these things that I heard in a closed door briefing? Do you see the issue there? I can't, because I can't show them the data. One of the big challenges for NGOs is that we have the raw data. We collect it, but it's locked down. It has to be for the safety of the people who give it to us. You can get the analysis and the final numbers, which don't identify who came from where at what time or said what. You just have information that's kind of anonymized, and puts people into a big statistic basket. Once you have that raw information, you can track someone down, and the North Korean government is listening. So we hate to say just trust us, but sometimes that's all we can say. Sometime in the future, hopefully, the time will come for justice. The time will come for everything to be released to the world. And when that comes, we want to try to make all these things public. But until that day, we have to keep things closed. Not because we want to, but because it's a huge matter of safety. What do I mean by a matter of safety here? I touched upon this before a little bit in a few lectures before, but if you missed it or you haven't really, you forgot or something, I can just put it to you in more clear information like this. So if you leave North Korea, if you escape North Korea, and especially if you say things that make the government look bad, then you're going to get branded a traitor, right? You are the highest criminal in North Korea for doing these sorts of things. The North Korean government knows about your family. They know where they live, and they do this. That's called the 3 generations of punishment, right? If you break the law in a really bad way, such as especially by committing treason, then they will punish your family up to 3 generations, which means your grandparents, great-grandparents, your cousins. All those people could suffer if you are considered guilty by the North Korean government. So if these people are giving us useful information that the North Korean government does not want us to hear, then we need to keep their identity secret. Otherwise, the North Korean government can find out what they've done and they can punish their families back home. And they might punish them with execution. Worse? I don't know. I don't know if there's anything worse than that, but they can definitely make their lives extremely miserable. So when I say that we cannot reveal this information, I mean we absolutely cannot reveal who gave us this information. We will not burn our sources. All right, so to wrap it up, it's much easier to believe in the process when you've worked at an organization. Part of the reason why I believe in these organizations so much is because I've worked with them and I've seen their process, and I've really gotten to get down on the inside and see the truth much better. And they are more open to the public than you might imagine. If you go to these organizations, you go to their lectures and talks, their conferences, many of which are open to the public, you will get to meet the North Koreans and you get to talk to them, and you get to see that they don't act like they've been coached at all. They don't seem like actors. They don't seem unreal. You get to have human conversations with them. You get to hear lectures. You get to see confidential videos if you're working with these organizations. And that stuff really lets me believe in what it is NGOs do. If you want to see for yourself, you can try working with these organizations as well. So that's, if you're really in question, that's what I recommend. If you want to see the truth, go straight to the source. If you don't want to see the truth, if you just want to believe in what you believe in, there's not much I can do to change your mind. Here today, this is what I've done is try to give you all the information you can possibly need to make up your mind and to move away from the idea that anyone who criticizes human rights in North Korea, anyone who studies is just a glowy or something like that. If you want to keep believing that, that's your choice. I can't stop you on that one, but I just really ask you to consider the information, consider the process as best as possible. If you're outside the NGOs, I understand. NGOs are a black box too, and that's why a lot of people do not trust us. What I do want you to hear, what I want to say, whether or not you are interested in these NGOs or this process, I just want to say that this is our process. I hope I can build some trust by clarifying this process to you. I'm being open about the process. I'm telling you what to do to get our data, why we can trust it, and I'm also telling you why it's not perfect and why we know it's not perfect. I'm trying to minimize the BS. If you want to trust the North Korean government instead, then ask them what they do to minimize the BS. Ask them their process. Ask them to show you everything that they don't necessarily have to classify due to state security risks, risk of US invasion or South Korean spies or whatever. Ask them to give you something more than tourism promotion videos. We can definitely give you more than that, even if it's not everything. We try to be as honest as we can, despite having all these challenges in safety and security and funding and keeping our organizations going. Despite the political bickering, despite all the obstacles from inside and outside the domestic sector. Does Pyongyang have to worry about any of that, about all of that, all the time? I mean, of course they have security challenges, but personally, I think they can afford to be much more open. I don't think that we need to keep digging around for data as we have been. I think they should be able to give us more of that data without us having to go to analysts and satellite data and stuff like that. They want investors and I think they want assistance and tutelage, things like that, right? So maybe they can be more open. But of course, there's a lot of benefit to being closed. So I want you to think about that. If you want to pick their side, I'm not saying you have to pick our side. You could be somewhere in the middle. But if you want to pick their side instead of trying to get to the middle, then think about all of this. Think about what the North Korean government is doing in terms of transparency. Look for the truth and be rational about it. If you only let other people research for you, and that means me too, then you're never going to know how true or how false your information is. Do what you need to do. Do what you have to learn more and, keep yourself honest. And if you find something new that challenges conventional thinking, then dig into it. Keep people.